Imagine discovering that giants once walked the earth, not in fairy tales, nor in invented stories, but according to the Bible itself. Imagine beings so impressive, so powerful, that ordinary men seemed like grasshoppers before them. Who were these creatures? Where did they come from? And the most disturbing question, could they still be among us in some form? Today, we will dive into one of the most fascinating and frightening mysteries of the scriptures, the Nephilim. But I warn you now, what you are about to hear may forever change the way you see the history of humanity. The first mention of these enigmatic figures appears in Genesis 6:4. There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. Even before the great flood, when human wickedness had reached unbearable levels in the eyes of God, these beings already inhabited the world. They were more than men. They were living legends, beings whose strength and fame transcended generations. But who exactly were the Nephilim? Many have tried to unravel this mystery, and three major interpretations have emerged. The first, and perhaps the most disturbing, is that the Nephilim were the result of the forbidden union between fallen angels and human women. Imagine celestial beings, created to serve the Most High, corrupting themselves to the point of physically merging with humanity. Jude 1:6 confirms that there were angels who did not keep their positions of authority, but abandoned their proper dwelling. And Peter, in his second letter, says that God did not spare the angels who sinned. There is, therefore, strong biblical support to believe that such transgressions resulted in visible and terrifying consequences. The birth of the Nephilim. The second interpretation suggests that the Nephilim were descendants of the wicked lineage of Cain. According to this view, the sons of God were the descendants of Seth, the godly line, while the daughters of men were the descendants of Cain, the rebellious line. The mixture of righteousness and corruption would have produced men of physical strength but fallen character, responsible for spreading the violence that led God to decree the flood. And there is still the third view, that the Nephilim were simply giant humans, direct descendants of Adam and Eve, but who, through divine intervention or human degeneration, reached uncommon proportions and powers. In all these hypotheses, one thing remains clear. They existed, and their impact echoed not only in the past, but perhaps far beyond. It is curious that in Numbers 13:32-33, when the spies of Israel return from Canaan, they report, "We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." They were terrified. The Nephilim were not only great in stature, they were imposing, inspiring fear, even in the bravest warriors. Deuteronomy 9:1-2 also speaks of great and tall people, descendants of the Anakim, whom no one could stand against. Coincidence? Or were these remnants of the ancient Nephilim? The detail that few notice is that Genesis states that there were Nephilim in those days, and also afterward. In other words, even after the flood somehow, this lineage survived or resurfaced. How? This question haunts scholars to this day. Some speculate that Ham, the son of Noah, or his wife, might have carried in their genes traces of this enigmatic race, which later manifested in the Anakim in Canaan and the Philistines, ancestors of giants like Goliath. And speaking of Goliath, we cannot ignore the impressive connection that the Bible draws. In 1 Samuel 17, Goliath, the giant from Gath, challenges the army of Israel. His height, his armor, his imposing presence, all match the description of the Nephilim. Was he a descendant? Very likely. What is fascinating is that God uses the unlikely, the small shepherd boy David, to defeat what seemed invincible. A young man who, with unwavering faith, proved that no matter the size of the enemy, when the Lord is on your side. But the story of the Nephilim does not end with Goliath, and this is where most people get lost. In Judges, in 2 Samuel, and in other books, we find mentions of other giants, entire cities of men of great stature. The battle against these descendants was ongoing, a dark remnant of an ancient rebellion, a physical reminder of the corruption that almost destroyed humanity before the flood. Now, stop and think with me. If the Nephilim were real, if they truly inhabited the earth, both before and after the flood, and if the Bible links their existence to the spiritual rebellion of angels and humanity, what does this teach us about the world we live in today? Could it be that the spiritual forces of evil still attempt to corrupt God's plan for humanity? Ephesians 6:12 warns us, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." The battle was never merely physical. The Nephilim are the visible tip of an invisible war, a war for the soul of man. And if you think all this was buried in the past, you are mistaken. Jesus in Matthew 24:37 declared, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man." In the days of Noah, the Nephilim walked the earth. Violence, corruption, the blending of divine and human all characterized that generation. And Jesus warns us, these signs will return before the end. Are the Nephilim just a distant memory, or are they a foreshadowing of what is to come? The giants we must face today may not be 7 meters tall, but they are spiritual giants, ideologies, moral corruptions, deceptions subtly disguised as light. The old battle persists, and only those grounded in the Word of God will remain standing. Now, many seek extra-biblical sources to understand the Nephilim, like the Book of Enoch. Although fascinating, we must remember, the Bible is the supreme source of truth. Genesis and Numbers provide us with the most reliable information, supported by countless manuscripts throughout the centuries. We do not need to look further to know that the spiritual war is real, and that giants, both yesterday and today, exist. The question you must ask yourself is, am I prepared to face them? Do I have enough faith to be like David before the modern Goliaths? Or will I be like the unbelieving spies who saw themselves as grasshoppers and retreated in fear? The choice is yours. The spiritual armor is available, described in Ephesians 6. But few are those who put it on. Few are those who decide to become true warriors of the Most High. You may not see giants walking the streets of your city, but if you open your spiritual eyes, you will see that the battle is even more intense today than in ancient times. In every decision, in every temptation, in every voice that tries to lead you away from God, there they are. Ancient enemies, old patterns of corruption, new forms of rebellion. Therefore, this video is not just about who the Nephilim were. It is about who you decide to be in the face of them. A fearful servant, hiding in the shadows of fear, or a child of God, wielding the sword of the Spirit, defeating giants by faith. The story of the Nephilim teaches us that greatness without God leads to destruction, but faith in God transforms even the smallest of men into a victor. That choice is before you now. And remember, just like in the days of Noah, time is running out.